any personal. So today we're going to talk about burnout, how to recognize the signs, and also to start to plan some steps to alleviating your burnout. So first, it's important to all be on the same page about what we're talking about. The classic definition from Merriam-Webster just identifies it as exhaustion of physical or emotional strength or motivation. And that's usually the result of prolonged stress or frustration. But the classic definition was first applied in the 70s from a psychologist who was really looking at stress and impact in medical professions, so mostly physicians and nurses that were in helping careers and the high levels of severe stress that they were experiencing. And so as we've moved into more modern definitions, these start to take on a much more holistic approach and multifaceted in looking at the various areas of our life where stress can creep in. So thinking about our different relationships with families or partners, physical exhaustion and fatigue, and the things that we don't like to talk about too, which are financial stresses and mental health needs, those sorts of things. So all of these things combined present a much more modern and holistic view. And so today we'll talk about a few of these different areas. And so as I go through them, a tip that will help us for our Q&A at the end is just to make a little note if you notice something that applies to you as we work through these different areas, so that even if you don't speak up during Q&A, you'll have some good takeaways at the end of this for your own unique situation. I also want to note here that the APA also notes that it's more of just a general stressor, but what we're going to also look at today is talking about how positive experiences can also bring stress. So looking at things like job promotions and how that unique experience is generally regarded as a positive thing, but still brings along with it additional responsibilities or stressors that contribute to our overall sense of burnout. And so we tend to diminish or dismiss those positive things when we talk about burnout, and we just focus on the negative. But keep in mind that positive things we go through still can impact you, and just keep those in mind as we move through this. So we'll work through some of the common signs of burnout here. I'm going to start with physical because those are often the easiest for us to acknowledge and to see the quantifiable signs of. And this can look like everything from changes in sleep and appetite all the way down to worsening of our health conditions, maybe even breakouts and things that we thought we were rid of from our teenage years and have creeped back in. And just also meeting our basic needs, like getting a shower when we need a shower and eating meals that are healthy and nourishing. So these are all a lot of the physical and easy to identify signs. I do want to note here that this is separate from any physical or mental health conditions that we might experience. So if those are on your radar, make sure to talk with a health professional about those. But the most common physical sign of burnout that we see are people talking about tiredness and fatigue and physical exhaustion. Another sign and symptom of burnout are the emotional and mental effects. So these are some of the ones we don't talk about as much unless we're with safe and trusted people. Again, these aren't related to mental or physical health conditions, but these can show up like difficulty making decisions. I wanted to include this here because there was a really interesting review through the APA about how when we are burned out and stressed, our ability to make everyday decisions is diminished. And so we sometimes don't really associate that with burnout, but having analysis paralysis is definitely a component of burnout. And this study also found that for women and people of color, that the compound effect of societal stressors with burnout can increase your difficulty in making everyday decisions. So there are a lot of facets here to the mental and emotional signs, even down to things like feeling apathetic about things that we used to care about. And suddenly you're just so burned out that you say things like, I don't even care. it's whatever. Those sorts of reactions can also be signs of burnout and something to note as you work through your burnout plan. Additional signs show up in our social relationships. And a lot of times that this is something that are some of the first things we cut. We'll turn down opportunities to meet with friends or engage in groups that we used to participate in. But it can really be a good indicator of how well we're functioning overall when we start cutting these things out that we used to really enjoy. So I think one of the most common things that I hear from people is the irritability when we start making little lash out comments to people that we love or we normally wouldn't speak to that way, and we're a little more irritable than we'd like. Um, that can show up, but also not communicating our needs to people that have demonstrated that they're willing to meet our needs can be a good sign. Maybe not communicating with your partner that you're burned out and you need some additional support. That can be a really great sign of burnout and a good indicator that there's room for improvement. Professional signs of burnout are obviously the most commonly associated with burnout. A lot of times people only think of job burnout. But as we've discussed, there are lots of different signs, but sometimes starting with the professional signs can be a good, easy way to get some objective information. So one I hear often is feeling exhausted or mentally burned out before your workday starts. If you show up at work and it's 8 a.m. and you're already burned out and feeling like you just want to go home, maybe that's a sign that you're having some work burnout. Spacing out at your desk when you know you have something you need to do, but you're just taxed out, that can be another good sign. So these are all starting points for you. I hope that as we've covered some of these, you're making some mental notes of how this shows up for you or people that you work or care for. And this last one is the one that nobody likes to talk about. And I think that's because we have a lot of stigma around financial signs of burnout, but I want to normalize these in today's discussion. The most obvious is, of course, financial loss through job layoff or job loss. But I think it's also important to note some of the more subtle ways that burnout can show up in our financial life. And that can include things like stress buying, making justifications for lots of small purchases to feel better in a moment of stress. That's very, very common. And it can also show up like maybe not communicating those financial habits with partners or people who share our income or resources. And it can also show up like a little bit of shame when we talk to our partner or even our financial advisor or tax person about our spending habits. So these are some common signs of financial burnout that often don't get a lot of attention, but can be other good indicators of burnout. And the elephant in the room is COVID-19. Prior to the pandemic, we saw burnout in lots of different ways, but the pandemic really exacerbated those and has brought a lot of additional things to the table. And so I wanted to mention it here because I hear burnout talked about a lot more often, but we're not recognizing the compound effect of the pandemic as much. And so the APA did a work and wellbeing survey in 2021, and they interviewed and surveyed a bunch of people, and overwhelmingly they found that a third or more were reporting a significant increase in many areas of their mental and physical exhaustion. And so I think that's a really good indicator if that randomized study is showing that it's a pretty normal experience, and we can start to look at the impact of the pandemic on our own lives. And so I've included some general categories here to think about, but almost every area of our everyday life was impacted by the pandemic, and some of those were lasting and permanent changes for some of us. So things like financial impact or even an impact to our daily routine or childcare. the NTI, non-traditional learning for child care and children. All of these things impacted the way we live our everyday lives. So we saw an increase in burnout just related to responding to the pandemic. And this is especially true for healthcare personnel, those specifically who care for or cared for COVID-19 patients. And some research through the NIH talks about how that those healthcare personnel were so much more likely to develop a condition that's unofficially coined pandemic stress disorder. Now, this doesn't show up in the DSM-5 or any of the international psychiatric measures, but it's very related to PTSD, and it's just a term that they're using to kind of acknowledge the impact specifically to healthcare personnel as a result of the pandemic. So whether you're in healthcare or not, I think it's really important that we address some of the impact of COVID-19 to our daily burnout and those that we love and care for. I also wanted to take a moment. I know Stephen mentioned my degree in psychology, and while I'm not an active practicing psychologist, I do want to note that there is a significant difference between burnout and clinical depression. Burnout does not typically greatly impair our ability to function in the various areas of our life. And it's also important to kind of look at the totality of our symptoms, how severe they are, how long they've been going on. And if we're not really sure, to talk to a loved one that can give us some objective feedback about what they observe. The main takeaway here is that depression usually shows up with a lot of mood and affective symptoms like low self-esteem, hopelessness, or even some suicidality. And those are not typically associated with burnout. So they do share exhaustion and general feelings of feeling down or maybe not performing at your best. But when we start getting some of those larger mood issues going on, it's usually a sign that we need to reach out and get some support. And so I just wanted to take a note here to normalize this. If you're experiencing this, that is totally normal as a result of prolonged burnout, and we have to destigmatize it if we're going to help ourselves and others. And there's really no difference in taking care of our mental health and compared to our mental health. And so some quick start solutions to get you started today would be to take a look at your foundational basic needs. As you see from Maslow's hierarchy of needs here, it forms the foundation that we build upon for all of our other needs as we move throughout life. So taking a look at how well you're sleeping and eating, and if you're making time to be active throughout your day, can be great indicators of some places to get started. When we meet our basic needs, we are then more able to start working on some of those other additional needs that are higher up in that hierarchy. So start there. Take a look at some of your sleeping habits and even your social connections, and see if there are little tweaks you can make to those little areas first. It can also be really helpful to look at the categories that we've covered so far and try to match your solution to that category. And keeping it flexible and fun is really important because we're more likely to do things that we actually enjoy doing. The white knuckle method is a bygone era, and we know research shows it doesn't work. So trying to find ways to have some fun and flexibility in your approach can really help. And so I included here the example of exercising with friends as a way to double dip, because you get to get some physical exertion, some socialization, and the physical activity also increases our dopamine and our endorphins and things like that. So we get a lot of benefits across several areas. So if you're stuck, try to think about those sorts of things where you can maximize your time and energy output and get lots of benefits back. But again, making sure that you're having some fun and seeing some more immediate benefits can really increase the likelihood that you'll keep with it. This is a little coaching acronym here to help you get started in creating your goals, and they're more likely to be successful if they follow this acronym. So making sure that they're specific in exactly what you want to target, measurable, meaning that you can quantify how well you're doing them, and that they actually will work towards the goal that you want to, and you have a deadline in mind. All of these things contribute to having more success. The achievable one is notable because sometimes we set unrealistic goals. As I mentioned before, starting out small can really help us to slide into some of these greater habits. So make sure that you're being realistic with where you are and the sort of goal that will help you get started. Sometimes taking a smaller bite is much easier at the beginning. And also, another easy way to just start today would be to just have an honest moment and reflect on how long you felt burnout. When we get burnout, it usually doesn't start overnight. It's the culmination of many effects. And so taking a moment to think about how long you felt this way can help you to be realistic in how long it will take you to start to feel better. Not to say that it will take the same amount of time, but just to be realistic that there's not an overnight magic pill to reversing some of these effects and making lasting changes. Communicating with those in our life and naming our needs can also help because it allows us to be really honest with where we're at and invite other people that care about us to help support us. And the last one is super important in acknowledging that any type of change, but especially something as sensitive as burnout, is going to feel a little uncomfortable at first. And that's okay. To just be okay with the fact that you don't feel great in these spaces, and so it's going to feel a little awkward to start moving into more healthy habits. But the longer we do it and the more we hold space for ourselves that this is totally normal, the easier it will become to recognize when we're experiencing burnout and then start to remedy it faster and with more ease, instead of letting it snowball and become this huge thing. And this last one, it's not a very common American thing to say, oh, I love that I need support and I need people to help me. We tend to think, I don't need help from others. I can do this on my own. But most of us are not an island. We are not able to meet all of our own needs. And so just acknowledging that we need help from other people can really allow us to lean into curing our burnout faster. So once you've accepted that you need some burnout help, just saying that this is a very human experience that I'm having. Many people feel burned out, and that's okay. And again, the tough love method, we know it doesn't work. So continuing to shove those feelings down is not going to help them get any better. And just being patient with yourself and others as you go through this process can help you to have a lot more success with it too. You may say you hired a life coach. Maybe the first one you met with isn't the right fit. It's important to maybe have consultations with these self-care providers and things like that. So you're getting a good match and also just making sure it's a good fit. So continue to be patient with yourself and others allows you to have a more flexible approach. And as I just mentioned, self-care, and I just want to take a second here to acknowledge it's a very trendy buzzword. We hear it all over the place, but it is really important to sort of normalize what it really means, which is meeting our needs and being in regular self-awareness with what our needs are. So the longer you do this and the longer you practice self-care, the more self-aware you'll become. And it will help you to also recognize that meeting your basic needs is the first step and that these higher self-care needs are further down the process. So when you do notice your basic needs slipping a bit, it'll be easier to recognize when to take care of those. And again, if you're talking with a coach or not, you can always start with journaling or some other reflective process that will help you look at where your needs are, where you'd like to go, and how you can reach out for support and create an action plan to alleviate some of your symptoms. I know that UK being such a large organization, we may have some leaders in the room with us today. So before we step more into some quick action steps, I wanted to take a minute for leaders. Thank you for all that you contribute. And I would like to invite you to take a look at some of these steps and see what might work for your teams. So some examples would include talking about it on a regular basis, and it might feel awkward at first, and this doesn't have to be a super formal conversation, but just asking people what they're doing, and maybe if they have scheduled a wellness day, asking them what they'll be doing and inviting them to do more wellness related activities. It can also be helpful to invite one of the UK Health and Wellness team members to do like a guided meditation, a mindfulness activity. They also offer, I'm pretty sure they still offer regular chair massage sessions that you can sign up for that are like 15 minutes. So, encouraging your team members to regularly engage with self care and wellness will set the tone for the culture from the top down, that this is an organization that wants people to be balanced and take their mental and physical health seriously. And so, starting these conversations with our teams can really help open up that conversation. So I've included some 9 quick steps here to get us started in thinking about ways that we can take action directly after today's call. Some apps that are available to us include Headspace, Aura, and Better Sleep. These are mostly geared towards meditation, some sounds and things you can listen to, or some sleep habits, tracking your sleep, things like that. And so that's again targeting some of those basic needs at the bottom of the hierarchy. Checking out the UK Health and Wellness website is a great place to start as well. They have a lot of events coming up that you can look at and say, what do I have time for, or what's something I could do right now? Some of them are online learning opportunities. As I mentioned before, you can also start with just taking some quick notes. This can be as simple as opening the Notes app on your phone and listing out 3 things from the last week or the last day that caused you stress and what the situation was. Because once you can name it, you can start to reverse engineer it and ask, what stressed me out? How can I work on this situation? What are my needs? And who in the situation might help and support me. So that's one quick thing you could do right after today's call. This next one, I know it's raining today, but maybe even just going out for a walk inside of your building, going down the hall, something like that to get you out of your normal environment, especially if you associate your desk or your workspace with stress. And getting some fresh environment, some fresh air can help greatly. Calling a friend. We all have that one friend who lifts us up and encourages us to take care of ourselves. So if you know who this friend is, most of us do, I encourage you to give them a call and really connect with them. Again, trying to lean into the honesty of what your experience is right now. And you might find that they also share, and then you can connect on how you're both experiencing what you're going through right now, and maybe find some ways to exercise together or do something self-care related to support each other. Another easy thing you can do right after today's call is to take 5 minutes and meditate or pray or whatever you identify with, to take a few minutes, check in with your body and the feelings you're having, and just relax for a few minutes. This also is an easy practice that you can continue day after day, and it's really quick and simple. So, and again, the apps I mentioned usually offer at least a 5-minute option. So you can use those to really help you squeeze in a really quick Band-Aid sort of fix for your stress. Texting a partner or a friend about a specific need can also be really helpful, because it's a quick action item that usually gets a quick response. So texting them and saying something like, I'm feeling stressed, or I've had a rough day, and then exactly what they could do to help you. So for example, texting a partner and saying, I'm feeling burned out. I'd like to have a massage this weekend. Can we talk about it after work? That tells them exactly what you're needing and wanting them to do. and also is being really honest and transparent about the feeling you're having that they can help you with. So that texting option is really great because it is so immediate. I also want to invite you to email me for support. You do not need to be an active coaching client with me to email me and get some ideas. I love to evaluate behavior and come up with creative solutions. So, and I really genuinely do care about people meeting their needs and feeling supported. So, if I can help in any way, if some things have come up through today's talk, I encourage you to really reach out to me and let me know how I can help you. And if nothing else, I would like to invite you to just make a quick list right now as we're talking, and identify one need from that list. And just think of something easy you could do before bed tonight. That's a quick deadline that will help give you some quick turnaround time. And if you repeat this practice day after day, you'll notice that you don't need to make a list anymore. It gets easier and easier to identify what those needs are, and you start getting in that practice daily. But for today, just think about a quick list you could make and say, for example, you have a hobby and you haven't been able to do it in a while and you're feeling burned out. Set aside 15 minutes when you get home or after dinner to just do that hobby. Read a book, exercise, whatever it might be. If we free ourselves a lot of times from these really strict limits of what we think self-care is, we can actually fit more self-care in. Sometimes we tell ourselves, oh, the workout needs to be 30 minutes because that's what we hear. But even 5 minutes helps our body and our minds. So freeing yourself from what action you can take allows you to find creative ways to work it in. So I wanted to leave a lot of time for discussion and questions that people might have so we can really talk about each person's unique needs or questions. So here I've included my contact information so you can reach out after today's talk. But I would love, Stephen, if we could open this up for the chat and people to unmute if they'd like to, so we can have some real conversations about burnout.
Yeah, and anyone should be able to unmute, or if you feel more comfortable, please do post in the chat any questions. I know there were a few comments throughout your presentation. One of the comments was, do you have any expertise with the well-being index and existing plans to use for continuum screening for clinical and non-clinical team members in our organization?
I am not familiar with how that index would be used through UK. I think that would be an important question to ask your health and wellness professionals in whichever branch of UK you're in. Partly just because the wellness index can be applied in a lot of situations, but it's important to be realistic in what can be applied in our specific areas. And sometimes they already have those things in place and we're not really aware of how some of those solutions can benefit us. And also sometimes they can really benefit from hearing our feedback of how those things can be applied. So I would speak with whomever's in your department and just ask if there's any such plan and how you can be more involved in that.
Thanks. So Jennifer Dixon asked, are there any suggestions on how to handle burnout, depression, anxiety, and grief all at the same time?
I would say start with getting support from your mental health or physical health providers first and foremost, if you're not already managing some of that with professional help, mostly because depression and anxiety can be greatly helped through medical intervention as well as talk therapy and those sorts of practices. But also we find that sometimes when people are on a really great plan for their mental health conditions, their burnout can improve as well. And so it gives us a clearer picture of how to address the burnout specific behavior and situations. So I would start there. And then if you're finding that your burnout isn't improving after those conditions have stabilized, I would seek non-clinical support from people like me and other service providers. So coaches who can help you with the non-clinical stuff, action plans, looking at behaviors and habits and supports are a great way to take it from the clinical into the non-clinical sphere.
Thanks. Additionally, there was a discussion on here about how burnout compares between the work from home, from those who work from home and those who do not. And I was just kind of curious if you had a comment on that.
Well, I first and foremost hate to really compare burnout because burnout and mental health in general is such a subjective experience. So what feels stressful to me may feel very different to somebody else. So first normalizing how we all experience stress. But I think that they're probably both equal when I speak to people who work in the office and the way that work in offices has changed because of the pandemic. It's more a qualitative difference than a quantitative difference. Working from home can sometimes have a compound effect because you don't have a break. But working in evolving and very different office environments can also be very stressful. So I guess my answer would be both. They're unique in their own ways, and I think it's important that we maybe focus more on how we're experiencing it than comparing it to how other people are experiencing their burnout.
Then one additional question on here is, do you have any suggestions on getting a supervisor on board with one's burnout plan?
Yes. Obviously, communication is really important. And I think if they're not supportive, looking at institutionally endorsed options that you have is a great place to start. Wellness days are given to you and endorsed by the university, so use them. And if you're not getting support for using them, speaking with your HR representative for your division will help you to ensure that those options are continued to be available to you. They can help you enforce those. But I also think you can have regular conversations with them about the workplace environment. And a lot of supervisors tend to respond best to solution oriented conversations. So if something we've talked about today seems like a great solution to the problem in your work environment, go to them with that first and lead with, I've noticed this is a problem. Here's a solution I heard about on a talk today that might help us. Is a great place to start because I think sometimes our supervisors may not have a good answer and they're going to shut it down if they don't feel like they have a good answer. So, and again, email me if you have a very specific work environment situation and you'd like to brainstorm some ideas, reach out. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out some of the specific obstacles you're facing.
Then I'll call on Bobby Joe, who has her hand raised for a question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, Bobby Joe.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you for putting this together. And as the staff senate, want to thank you for representing the things that we offer here at UK. And somebody put in the chat about the wellness days. And yes, you get 2 wellness days. I just wanted to promote that. So that's something I just want to promote and tell you that self-care is something that is very important to me. I also wanted to get your opinion. There are a lot of other things that you can do. Like I wear an Oura ring, O-U-R-A, and it is a daily, it keeps your daily scores for your sleep, your readiness, and your activities. And I will tell you, and I'm just saying this to the group, that once I started wearing this Oura ring, it starts to develop who you are and what your habits are. And it does create a sense of understanding where you're at. If you're lacking sleep, how sleep is restorative. And so just like Michael said at the beginning, how important sleep is. And when you're burnt out, you're probably not sleeping well. So having something like an Aura ring will help you start to identify where you can make some changes in your life. And I just wanted to promote that. And, I don't get anything from it. I'm just saying something I do. And it has really been quite beneficial to me. And just wanted to share that as well, along with yoga and meditation and everything else.
Yeah, that's great. Most of us that have smartphones have some kind of sleep app that's native to our device. If you have a smartwatch, most of them come with a native app as well. So that's a great place to start if sleep is one of your main hurdles, and especially for those with children, or maybe you're a caregiver for a parent that it keeps you up at night, and so sleep is really a hard pain point for you. I would also say if sleep is a difficult thing, setting up routines can be really helpful, as a great place to start looking at what your routines are and how you can make small tweaks, small being the really key word there, to start to move the needle. So maybe looking at your phone right before bed is not helping you. Setting a timer to put the phone down might be helpful. One of those get to bed reminders, and then actually following it and kind of playing around with how those habits work for you. For example, I had a client who had a lot of work anxiety and a lot about not being reachable during important hours, being on call. And we talked about setting the settings within your phone so that you have certain people whose phone calls always ring through, but then the rest of it is in sleep mode. And that gives you the psychological freedom to acknowledge the people who need to reach me through the night will and can, and I can go to sleep completely restful, knowing that I will not miss an important call. But if the phone doesn't ring, the world will go on completely normally, and I can get some really good sleep. So setting up little small changes like that can really make a difference in how we allow ourselves to relax and restore too.
Troy Martin is hand.
Hey there, Michelle.
Hey,
Can y'all
Troy.
hear me?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask if you would talk to the folks here and mention the, I think it was called Jace, that something put on Facebook that I found extremely helpful. And it's kind of tied to burnout if you start getting, your mindset going angry. And I just thought that was such a powerful tool that if you could just share that little tidbit, that it might help some people that are possibly dealing with those kind of situations.
What are you talking about? The Nate video that I had?
Nate, is it
Yeah.
Nate or I couldn't remember. I don't remember the acronym, but I remember I was like catching myself doing those steps.
That's so funny. Thank you for mentioning that one. So this is just a little acronym I came up with because I noticed for burnout, it can help to have like something quick. So NATE stands for negative bias, making assumptions, taking things personally, and talking in extremes like always and never. And I developed that acronym because I noticed that it kind of marries some of the thought patterns with also some of the social habits. So taking things personally when most people are not super concerned with what we're doing. And but also negative bias is a big one, and that's why it's first. We sometimes get in the habit of always looking for the negative and forget to look at what's working, what's the positive, what's the opportunity. So just acknowledging when we're getting stuck in the Nate can help us to really I mean, if you feel like you're in that space, that can be a sign of burnout too. Just the fact that some of those resonate can be a good sign. But yeah, I hope that helps. I've got the full video on my social media if you want to go and watch it there, and save it so that you can come back to it. But thank you, Troy. Yeah, I hope that helps. I'm glad to know it really stuck.
Yeah, thank you.
So another question on here is, how do you deal with a manager that treats wellness days as a weakness? They allow them, but make comments, but they never use them because it is failing your department.
Well, a couple of things there. You might choose not to disclose that it's a wellness day and just submit it and maybe not talk about what you're doing on your wellness day. I don't know quite the social dynamic going on there. But I just want to maybe validate that we don't have to necessarily tell the group what we're doing. So it's okay to just book that day and not justify it to anybody what you're doing. But if that is the case and your manager is the only person that knows and they're sharing your personal information with the team and making a spectacle of your wellness day, that might be a good opportunity to talk to someone in your HR in your division about what your rights are as an employee and your discretion there. Again, I'm not super familiar with what UK's policies are about that now, but that would be a conversation that you could maybe have. And ultimately, they're university approved and sanctioned. So if they're still not respecting them, that's when I would maybe reach out to HR and have a conversation about a hostile work environment. And maybe that would be your last option. Start with the least nuclear option there, but being aware that that is your right. And ultimately, if the other options fail, it would be a time for a more productive conversation about the environment you're working in.
Thanks. So I know that Kristen asked on here as well, just to confirm, was that NAPE or NATE?
T as in Ted.
Okay.
Like the name Nate. It was just a cute little acronym I came up with one day when I noticed all of these commonalities between a lot of the psychologists and healthcare providers that talk about self-care. And I noticed, oh, this one's coming up a lot. And so is this one. And so those don't really make any other better word. So we ended up with Nate with a T.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle. I can tell that this topic has really resonated with this group. Thank you, everyone that takes time out of their lunch to attend these. We really hope to continue to bring these to you all. If you have ideas for other topics or speakers, please do reach out to our team. We've been really receptive of a lot of suggestions, so we'll definitely continue to take your suggestions, and we want to make this Lunch and Learn a really positive experience for you all. Michelle, really appreciate it. We will post a recording for everyone as well. I know there were a few questions about the recording. I will get that recording out. I really appreciate everyone's comments too. I will try to get those comments posted with the recording as well. A lot of useful links and information there. So we will share that out. And if there's any questions, do feel free to reach out to our Staff Senate team, and we'll continue to share information. Just quick reminders. At the beginning, we talked about the one day for UK. That will be April 19th. That's 24 hours of donations. So keep that in mind. And then Employee Appreciation Day is coming up May 25th from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. I did post a link. I'll try to post it again for the creativity showcase. If you have a talent, I'm trying to think of something I could do, but if you have a talent, please click on that link. We'll share more information about that as well. But I think we would love to see all the talents that come out of our UK employees. And then our next Lunch and Learn will be April 21st, and we will talk more then about the Staff Senate, and we'll use that as a meet and greet session. So we'll share more information about that soon. And yes, feel free to reach out. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Michelle, everyone that participated and was so active. Really appreciate it. I think this was a great topic and a great session.
Thanks for having me. I hope everybody has a great weekend and be well.
Thank you all, and have a great weekend.
You too. You have a great weekend.
Thank you.